Okay, hi there. In this video, let's spend a few minutes looking at a really key economic indicator for the UK, and that is the trade deficit. So the trade balance, of course, is the difference between the value of what we export minus what we import. And the UK generally imports more than it exports, meaning that each year, 2020 was an exception because of the pandemic, we were in a trade deficit. Now, interestingly, in 2022, the value of the UK trade deficit increased significantly to £85 billion. We ran a trade deficit in goods of £230 billion. It's nearly £5 billion a week, partly offset by a huge surplus in services, a record of £145 billion. But add those two together, X minus M, you get an overall trade deficit of £85 billion. Now, the forecast for 2023, which is worth knowing, is that trade balance in goods is set to widen still further to just under £100 billion. This is big news for the UK. If we express that number as a share of our national output, which is probably a better guide to the scale of a trade deficit, again, we can see a familiar picture. So the trade gap widened from 1.2% of GDP in 2021 to 3.4% of GDP in 2022, and is expected to be just under 4% of our national output in 2023. So the trade deficit is clearly getting bigger. It's as big as it's been since the global financial crisis. So why might the UK be running a much bigger trade deficit in 2022-23? Well, there are many reasons, some on the demand side, some on the supply side, but let me just pick out, if it's okay with you, 3 reasons. The first is that the growth of exports in the UK has softened. Our export performance has not been as strong, and many UK businesses are claiming that exporting to the European Union is now becoming harder because of the non-tariff barriers that have been in place after the UK left the European Union single market in January 2020. Of course, the UK has signed a trade agreement with the EU, which basically eliminates tariffs, but there are many non-tariff barriers, rules and regulations, product standards, safety checks, and so on, which British firms have to meet in order to export into the single market, which of course is a customs union plus all the single market regulations. So export growth has weakened, particularly to the European Union, although to other countries as well. The second factor, I think, is on the import side. That, of course, in 2022 and into the recent year, we've seen the world or the global prices of many imported commodities going up, including, obviously, natural gas and crude oil. Of course, the UK imports the bulk of the gas that it uses, the liquefied natural gas and the gas through the interconnected pipelines. So the UK has become increasingly dependent on natural gas, and the days of very cheap gas came abruptly to a close in 2021-22. Price of oil's gone up, so too the world prices for food. And of course, the demand for these products is often price inelastic, a low elasticity of demand. So even when the world price goes up, we tend to buy similar amounts, and as a result, of course, the value of what we import goes up, worsening our trade balance. And there may be a third reason. I could have focused on longer term structural reasons, but I just wanted to pick out perhaps the impact of the currency weakness. You see, in the second half of last year in particular, the value of the pound against the euro and the dollar fell quite sharply. I think the pound was down as low as £1 buying $1.05 in September 2022 before it recovered a little bit. But the pound has been weak against the euro and the dollar. And of course, if the pound is weak, if it depreciates, this increases the price of the things we have to import, many of which are priced in euros and dollars. Whereas the exports, of course, take time to respond. In fact, they could be a little bit cheaper in overseas markets. So you could, in theory, bring in the idea of a J-curve effect on the trade balance, that initially the trade balance might be worsening because of exchange rate weakness. So there we go. If you want to take a screenshot, maybe add to your notes, here are 3 possible reasons. There are many more why the trade gap in the UK has widened. Now, Britain has left, the European Union, the UK has left the European Union in 2020, but the idea that the EU is no longer our biggest trade partner, of course, is for the birds. The European Union accounting for 42% of exports and of goods and services in 2021 and 46% of imports. And in 2022, last year, the value of imports from the EU went up by 17%, whereas the value of the things we sell to the European Union dropped by 6%. Little wonder that the trade gap with the European Union reached a record level in 2022. So there we go, a quick look at the economics of the UK trade deficit. Hopefully you found it useful. If you did, please press the like button and maybe consider subscribing to the channel. Loads more revision videos on the way. Stay happy, stay curious. See you sometime soon.